Hi Corey, I hope all is well. I made this quick video to try and kind of walk through a process I would take with this. But it's kind of important to know what type of data you're working with. So for instance, you have a list, and it's a list of people that attended an event from a location. Now, is from each location. Now, what is that each location? What format is that in? Meaning, do you have a list of people per zip code, or do you have a list of people with actual addresses? So if you have a list of people with actual addresses, what we can do is we can geocode those addresses so they all become points, and then you can create a near field, meaning a field that calculates the distance between each point to where your event occurred. So for instance, I have a list that I made up, and it has 12 addresses here. They're kind of all similar addresses, so they'll plot to the same location, but we'll pretend that it's 12 different addresses at different zip codes. So if you go to File and then Sign In, and if you don't remember your ID and password, let me know. I'll send it over to you. But you would sign into your ArcGIS Online account, and what you would do is you would geocode these addresses. So you would right-click on the attendees list. You would say geocode the addresses. ArcGIS Online is the geocoder that we'll use, and then you fill this out, this box out. So basically the addresses are in multiple fields, right? You have address, city, zip, and state. So the address is the address field, the city is the city field. It should automatically populate for you depending on how your columns are named, and so forth. State, region, postal is zip. And then you pick where you want that to go. And once that's all set up, you click OK, and it'll match your records. If for some reason you get like a 50% match or something, you click on Rematch. And you'll have the option to investigate why it wasn't matched. So if the match status is U for unmatched, then you would just click on this and say, okay, this is the address in my list. These are my potential options that I could match it to. So you would just select, you would say, oh, it's, it was actually supposed to be 2127, and then you click match based on that. So all of ours matched, so I don't need to worry about that. And here's our 3 points, our 3 different addresses. Let me change the symbology to make it look a little clearer. Okay, so these are, our 12 people live in either of these 3 locations, and this is the event. This is where my event occurred. So, and these are all my zip code maps. So the next thing that I would do is I would go open my search window and type near and hit search. And the NearAnalysisTool will actually conduct an analysis of, oops, bear with me. Okay, the NearAnalysisTool will give you a distance of each point to its near feature. So basically for each one of these points, what is the distance to there? But before you run this tool, it's very important that you're projected correctly, because projection is how we the most important thing about projection is it gives us the ability to accurately measure things, and this is kind of important in what you're doing. So go to your data frame, select properties, and make sure that the coordinate system that you're using is a projected coordinate system, which is the state plane south is what we use for Philadelphia. So it's a projected coordinate system. It's the state plane, NAD 1983, and it's the state plane south, Pennsylvania. There it is. So it's this one here, state plane south, right? If your data frame, like if your zip code layers for some reason didn't already automatically set that projection. My zip code layer had already that projection, so I can just go to layers and then pick that projection. But it's also very important for the tool to have the actual features that the distance is being calculated on has to have that same projection. So when you geocode, it usually doesn't. So what you do is you right-click this geocoded new layer, go to source, and check the projection. You notice there is no projection here. So we need this layer to have the same projection as the state plane south, so that it's otherwise it's going to give you like distance in decimals or something like that, which is not very helpful. So what you want to do is you right click your layer, data, export data, and I'm just going to call this attendees 2, and it's a shape file. And make sure, most important with this, we don't want to use this layer's source data for the coordinate system. We want to use a data frame. We check to make sure that the data frame had that state plane south, and we want to use that data frame's coordinate system, which is the projected state plane south. So hit yes. And I'm just going to change the symbology to match what we had before. Okay, so this is the layer that has the correct projection. I'm going to remove the original geocoded layer. So if I go to properties and then source, okay, so now I'm projecting on the NAD 1983 state plane south 3702 feet. Great. Now I can run this tool and it'll give me a result back in inches or feet. So my input feature is all of my people, right? So the input feature, this is the input features that can be point, line, or polygon. So that would be my attendees. My near feature, oh, I'm sorry, I had that backwards. Actually, my input feature is where my event occurred. My near features, this is going to get a new column in its attribute table that will represent a distance to your input feature. So that's my attendees list. Okay, so I have my input, which is my location where the event occurred, and I have my points, which represents the addresses. And then that should be it. That's all I do with this field. I click OK. So this is the near tool, and my input feature is where my location occurred. My near features is where all of my attendees are. So what's going to happen when I run this tool is a column in my attendees list will be generated that represents the distance to where my location occurred. So I have where my location occurred and the geocoded addresses. If I click on the near tool, my input feature is going to be my attendees, and my near feature is what my distance is going to be calculated on. Click OK. So now what that did was, this is my attendees list now has a new column in it. So when I open my attendees list, I have a new column all the way at the end, and what I'm looking for is this near distance. Now each one of my attendees has a number that represents the distance, and I believe that's distance in feet, but let's double check. So for instance, I'm going to highlight this one. So that's this point here. And let's use this measure tool. And distance, let's put it still in feet. Great. So this is, let's go to our data view so we can, okay. So great, so this is the point, and measure distance from here to here is 7245, so 7,245 feet, exactly what is in here. So now you have a column that represents the total distance of each point to where your event occurred. So if you don't have a list that includes addresses that you can geocode, what you can do is you can sort your list you can do it based on zip code. So the way you would do that is to first, maybe what you need to do is create a pivot table that will calculate the total number of records within each zip code. And the way that you would do that is you would open your attendees list in a regular Excel format, and then go to, I think it's under data. No, it's pivot tables. Oh, so it's under insert and then pivot table. And select new worksheet and hit OK. And it will give you the option to create a pivot table. So what I want to do is I'm going to take my rows are going to be my two options of zip codes. If you have a long list, it'll probably be many more. And I'll drag again zip codes into the values. And I don't want a sum. I don't want it to add up. I want it to be a count. So basically this just told me that I have 8 people in this zip code and 4 people in this zip code. So I want to convert this over into a spreadsheet or a CSV that I can join with my zip code data. So let's create a new sheet, and we're going to copy we're going to paste what we just copied. Oops. So copy this, which is the zip codes, that's the total per zip code. Hit paste. Okay, that's all I need. So now I have, oops, I need column headings. It's important to have column headings. So this is going to be zip, and this is going to be zip, and this is going to be count. Right, so this is each zip code and how many people per zip code. So I can delete this sheet. I don't need it anymore. I just needed it to create my pivot, and I can delete my pivot table. Don't need that anymore. I just needed it to get a count. So I'm going to save this as a CSV so that I can add it to my ArcMap document, and I'm going to call this attendees by zip code. Okay. Yes. For some reason it always asks you that. Just hit this and again. Don't know why it does that, but yes. Okay. So you have an attendees zip by zip code CSV in that file now. Okay. So let's add that list, that new list, to our document. So it's the attendees zip CSV, and if we open that up, it's the 2 zip codes with the number of people that are in it, right? Okay. So we want to join that to our zip code layer. So let's open our zip code. Open attribute. Okay, so I'm just going to dock them next to each other. So I have my attendees list by zip code, and I have my zip code list. So I need to make sure that my data type of my zip code in my attendees list and my data type of my zip code in my zip code list match. So I right-click this column, click on properties, this is a long, right-click the zip code columns, it's a string. So I need to make a column in here that is the same thing as the zip code column, but that it's a long data type. So in my zip code table, so I click on this tab just to make sure I'm in that zip code table. I go to add field, and I'm going to call it zip2, and change data type long to match my list. Right click, select field calculator, and I want this new column that I just created, zip2, to have all the same information that's in this column, code. So I'll just double click on that. So zip2 equal code. That's my field calculator function that I'm doing. Great. So now I can go to properties, and I have a long in this table, which is the attendees, and I have a long in my zip code table, so I can join these two now. Okay. So I'm going to right click the zip code layer, and I'm going to join it with attendees by zip. And since I clicked on a right clicked on a zip code layer first, that join is going to be based on my zip code too, right? So that's that column that I just made to make sure it matches this. And in my attendee zip, it's the zip. Validate the join. You should get 2 total, and that's right, because we only have really 2 zip codes in our attendees. Hit OK. If you had maybe 20 different types of zip codes, then you would have to make sure that you got it a 20 out of 21 or whatever. If you have zip codes from multiple states, you may need a zip code layer that represents all of those states. So when you have, so first figure out how many states you're dealing with, and then make sure that your zip code layer includes all of those states. So we're going to click OK. So now what we have is a new column in my zip code layer that represents where there actually were people that attended my event. So in this case, only 2 zip codes had people that attended my event. I'm only interested in those zip codes, so I'm going to do a definition query where my zip code count is greater than 0. So you should be able to get zip code layer at a USA scale. So if you go to Act Data from ArcGIS Online, you can type in zip codes and uncheck this search only in Philadelphia box. So you can add this layer, like the 2014 zip codes, and join your attendees list to that layer. So that way, if your attendees had people attending the, if your list had people attending the event from multiple states, then that would work. I don't know what your data looks like. I mean, I don't know if you have addresses or if you have zip codes. So, okay, so we're going to pretend that we only had 2 zip codes. So we're going to run that same tool. So what you want to do is, once you have your joined layer, so once you have your zip codes that represent zip codes that have more than just 1 or have more than 0 people, so like all the zip codes that didn't have any attendees, they're not showing up here anymore because we did this definition query that said only show me where there's a count greater than 0, so all the other zip codes went away. So you want to export that out as a layer. And we're going to call that zip codes with attendees. So this is a zip code layer that only has the zip codes in it for which there was an attendee. Hit OK. Yes. So now I'm going to remove this. So we're going to run that Near tool again, but this time, instead of using the attendees, the geocoded point data, we're going to use the new zip code layer that only has the zip codes with people that attended. And the location stays the same. We want a distance between the center of each zip code to this location, and we click OK. Great. So now if we open this attribute table, we have a distance field. So it's not as accurate as using point data. So for instance, so here's our point, and so that it's not as accurate as using point data because it actually, I was wrong, it doesn't calculate it to the center. It calculates the distance to the nearest edge of that zip code. So it's much more accurate to have point data to use to calculate distance. So for instance, this zip code here, the near distance that you got was 3,519 feet. And that's because at the closest point, that's the difference, the distance, right? The closest point from this of the zip code boundary to where your event occurred is 3,519 feet. So if possible, try to get your data at a point level so you can get really accurate numbers. You can get point to point distance. So that's how this tool works best. I hope this was helpful. If not, please feel free to give me a call or a text or send me an email and let me know.